Ontario One Call Limited. Mr. Bailey.
Member from Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 180, an act respecting Ontario One Call Limited.
Mr. Bailey has moved second reading of Bill 180. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation. Member from Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I begin, I would like to welcome the following people to the Legislative Assembly today, all of whom have been instrumental in bringing Bill 180, an act respecting Ontario One Call Limited, to fruition or lending their support to our efforts. I'd like to welcome Jeff Fitzgibbon, they're all in the West Members Gallery, Executive Director of Ontario One Call, Jim Douglas, President of Ontario Regional Common Ground Alliance, Paul Redick, from Union Gas, Matthew Gibson, James Whitaker, Carmina MD, Laura Whittam of Union Gas, Ben Hamilton, Vicki Mitchell, Sean Boland, Grant Kilpatrick, Greg Nopsky, and James Milner, all of Enbridge Gas Distribution, Leslie Elliott, Lynn Chaput of Bell Canada, Dave Wolfe of Vivax, and Gord McMillan of the City of Toronto. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to take a moment to explain why this bill is so important to me. First of all, through my life in the industry and beyond, I've always thought that safety should not be voluntary. It in fact should be mandatory. My riding of Sarnia-Lambton is home to Ontario's oil, gas and chemical industry, an industry that I devoted over 30 years of my life to. In fact, just prior to my election to this House, I in fact worked for Nova Chemicals, St. Clair River Works, in Corunna, where I was a construction coordinator and was in charge of issuing excavation permits, among other duties. Mr. Speaker, since the first discovery of oil in North America in my hometown of Oil Springs in 1858, the people of Sarnia-Lambton have been leaders in development practices and technology that have helped change our society for the good. Sarnia-Lambton became a major oil refining centre during Ontario's 19th century oil boom and a global centre for petrochemical production during World War II. Today, the City of Sarnia and the County of Lambton play a major role in Canada's petroleum market and is a terminus for many major pipelines leading from the United States and Western Canada. And of course, many of those pipelines branch off these main lines to connect the city's petrochemical and other infrastructure to downstream facilities. Mr. Speaker, when working in Sarnia's Chemical Valley, the first lesson that any new employee learns is that safety is always job one. Mr. Speaker, if you talk to any of the hard-working employees and managers involved in Sarnia's petrochemical industry, they'll tell you that being aware of what dangers you may face on a job site is the only way to know what sort of precautions you need to take. This is even more important when those pipes, electrical or telecommunications line you are working on, or are part of that vast network of hidden infrastructure that connect all of our plants, factories, businesses, and homes. However, today, homeowners and excavators alike are left with a system to locate underground infrastructure which is outdated, overcomplicated, and very cumbersome. To be frank, Mr. Speaker, Ontarians are left with a system which is unnecessarily compromising the safety of homeowners and excavators. For example, Mr. Speaker, today, before you plant a tree, dig a garden, landscape or fence your lot, or excavate for a pool or driveway, or at a porch or deck, you as a homeowner or excavator are expected to call for the locates of underground infrastructure on your property before you excavate. In other words, you are expected to call for the locations of wires, pipelines, water mains, and anything else that could be under your property. Then those utilities, hopefully, will arrive to mark the ground above where this infrastructure exists. The problem, Mr. Speaker, lies in that many communities across Ontario, you may have to call up to 13, that's right, 13 different phone numbers to ensure that you have covered everything that might be underground in your area. So before you start your project, you need to account for electrical power lines, cables, conduits, street lighting, traffic signals, gas, oil, petroleum, potable water, sewers, telecommunication line, signal lines, and other conduit, and the list goes on. This is what I mean when I say that Ontario has an outdated, overcomplicated, and cumbersome system in place. So I don't think it will be too much of a surprise to you when I say that some homeowners and excavators simply aren't bothering to call before they dig. Mr. Speaker, without easy access to proper and complete information of underground infrastructure, damage regularly occurs to natural gas lines, electrical wiring, and water mains. So in the very least, this means increased costs to homeowners, excavators, municipalities, taxpayers, and ultimately the province. Accidental damage to underground infrastructure is not only expensive, but it can be in fact deadly. Today, the number of emergency calls that result from damage done to underground infrastructure in Ontario is on the rise. due to the growing complexity of underground infrastructure in our province. Accidental hits to pipelines, especially those carrying natural gas, are an increasing threat to public safety for all Ontarians. Mr. Speaker, just for a moment, consider some of these real-life scenarios. Surgeons in our province now perform state-of-the-art telesurgery on patients across Canada. Imagine the complications that would result from a contractor digging without locates, damaging that telecommunication line, and interrupting or cancelling that surgery while in progress. These have happened. Or consider what could happen, like in the fall of 2010, when a contractor digging without locates in Whitby, Ajax, and the Oshawa area. On 3 separate days in 1 week, this contractor damaged a telecommunication line, impacting service to over 250,000 customers. Just imagine if this happened during a major event like the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup Finals, or the upcoming royal wedding. Mr. Speaker, just this week, a contractor digging around a Union Gas facility without proper locates damaged a major line that cut off gas service to over 60 customers. These are just a number of examples of what can and has happened when contractors and or homeowners dig without locates in this province. In fact, in Ontario, there were over 5,500 gas pipeline strikes between January of 2008 and December of 2010. And, unfortunately, 2 of these strikes tragically resulted in fatalities. Mr. Speaker, last autumn, a company called Genco Masonry was fined over $225,000 following a fatal explosion at the site of a residential home construction. The company was employed to do landscaping work at this Niagara Falls residence when they accidentally punctured a propane line on the property. This propane leached through the earth into the homeowner's basement where it ignited and resulted in a large explosion, demolishing the home. Tragically, a 58-year-old grandmother of 3 who was in the home at that time died in the explosion, and 2 other women were seriously injured. Following an investigation last November, the Ministry of Labour found that this landscaping company had made no effort at all to discover the location of underground utilities or have these locates marked. This grave oversight left the workers on site with no knowledge of what was beneath the ground where they dug, and tragically resulted in the death of this Niagara Falls woman. But it's not just small firms that can miss locates. Last month, a judge ordered a major construction company in the Toronto area to pay more than $280,000 in connection with a fatal propane explosion at an East Linton home near Owen Sound. Again, an unmarked propane line was severed the day before using a machine called a ditch witch burring machine. This propane, Mr. Speaker, leaked through the soil, permeated the concrete block foundation. Then it was ignited later on when a candle was lit in the home. One resident escaped unharmed. The other was caught in the explosion and fire, resulting in third-degree burns to 85% of their body. He passed away 2 days later, tragically. Mr. Speaker, the business of digging in this Ontario is risky business. Sitting idly by and doing nothing is not an acceptable position when the well-being and livelihood of Ontario residents is in jeopardy. I believe it is long overdue for our province to have a mandatory one-call system. That is why I introduced Bill 180, the Ontario One Call Act 2011. Bill 180 will create a single call centre for all underground locates for the use by homeowners and excavators alike. So instead of calling 13 numbers to receive all of your locates, homeowners and excavators alike would make one free call to Ontario One Call, and they would dispatch the utilities to mark these underground infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, this is a simple solution. The organization and capacity to implement this system is currently available. Ontario One Call is already operating as an industry initiative, a central call centre in Guelph with 130 members, representing over 700 infrastructure agencies in Ontario. Unfortunately, since participation is not mandatory, the majority of municipalities and small utilities have yet to join support this useful and prudent call system. Industry experts estimate there are still over 400 utilities and municipalities with infrastructure in the ground that have not registered. The evidence of the effects of mandatory one-call systems is clear and abundant. Currently, each and every United States state has in place a mandatory one-call system. The federal government of the United States thought it was such a good idea, they mandated a national number, 811. When you dial 811 anywhere in the U.S., you are automatically connected to the call center that has access to your area's information. As a result of the 811 system, incidents of infrastructure and utility damages has decreased by close to 70% between 2004 and 2008. Mr. Speaker, that 70%, that is a major shift away from damage and ways to increase safety and productivity. That's the sort of result that the good people of this province deserve when this House hopefully passes this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I hope that all members of this House can recognize the need to implement a simple and effective solution to a persistent problem with the current utilities locating system. Thus, I would hope that the members of this House will assist me and moving Bill 180 through the House and moving one step closer to creating a comprehensive one-call system. Thank you again. And like I said, safety shouldn't be voluntary, it should be mandatory. Thank you.
Further debate?